as I was saying, like I just want a unified messenger service, so it could be like, here's all your things from Teams, from your Discord, from GChat, from this webinar chat, and we had the technology in like 2003 where I could see my 400 different AOL Instant Messenger IDs and my like ICQ, and I'm sure there were like three or four others that like you had one friend that used because he was like his parents had like some weird internet provider like and now it's I have to have 40 apps on my phone and everything like makes a slightly different beep and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of this competition to be the one, and it kind of even goes to the whole that Chiefs Dolphins game being on Peacock instead of being broadcast that, hey, pretty much turning a football playoff game into a pay-per-view. Um, it's just one of these now that people have figured out how to try and monetize and squeeze dollars out. It's just going to keep going. So,
Yeah, it that is frustrating. It is part of what I miss about the old internet is just when it was you had like Google Reader, all these like RSS things where I could just put a feed on my page, do whatever I wanted, and I could do it. And if I could do it, that's really saying a lot for how interoperable it was. That or I
yeah,
have rose-colored glasses.
it is. It is one of those things where it was a simpler time, and it's and actually dovetails nicely with what we're talking about today. With yeah, it used to be that you didn't have to do it this way, but now because a bunch of other people made decisions, now we have to do it this way. But I can see a couple people trickling in. Hey, Joe, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. I see a few other folks slowly logging on, and we'll give it another minute or two
Yeah.
for waiting for people to sign on, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I think the best summary of like where the internet is today is someone said that it's basically like four websites where you go to one to see like screenshots of the other three.
That sounds about right.
Uh, and uh, whose study was it? I think I keep seeing it crop up yesterday where they're like, "Oh no, for sure, Google is even worse because everyone has figured out the SEO game and everyone has figured out how to like streamline their page so it gets to the top, and so like the everything on the top is like stuffed with those like with all sorts of ads. It's like a slideshow. Every other thing you see is an ad. Uh, and it's just so hard to use unless you really know what you're doing or you're dedicated enough to go down to like page 10.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty it's pretty rough.
And which is where I think our kind of this kind of thing where you're giving information from an expert directly is more useful now than it might have been in the past. Now that you can't just go into Google and say, "Hey, what's this going to be?" And that's my way of segueing to say good afternoon, everybody, and welcome as we're trickling in. We're going to be hearing from Will McPhee here, our CEO of System Support. We're an IT provider who's been helping clients in the Boston area for more than 30 years. Will started his career in the nuclear power industry and returned back to the Boston area to help his father protecting small and medium sized businesses and your most important assets, your ability to get things done. And with that, I'm going to welcome Will, welcome everybody, and let's look at what good security should look like.
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're staying warm today here on a very chilly January day. So today I wanted to talk about what does good security look like, because I know in the cyber world we throw a lot of different terms around, and because it all happens in that one screen, kind of like we were bantering about earlier, it's very difficult to understand what each piece is doing, um, behind the scenes. Whereas in the physical world, when you look at security, it's very obvious the different pieces that are together for being able to, um, you know, how do you know that you are truly armed to the teeth? So I wanted to start today's presentation with kind of a general question for the audience of how many of you have visited a really high level security facility. In my case, because I came from the nuclear world, I got to see nuclear power plants, which have an insane level of security for good reason. And then you can see how that shifts from
In or like a
insane.
hospital.
Yeah, a hospital might be one where some security things are obvious, some are not.
Mhm.
Um, Same down to the airport. I flew in from Logan this weekend, and so some things for security are very obvious about the TSA, and some things are not very obvious. And so, kind of talking about what are those, what are those obvious items that jump out at people, and then what are those subtle pieces that are kind of hidden beneath the surface that you might not be so privy to. So, kind of talking, what is that eye in the sky for security? And it's really security is the ability that what you care about is um, what you care about is in the places that it needs to be in. There's a term called CIA, which is kind of funny that it's related to security, and it stands for confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility.
Mm.
And the idea there, in plain English, instead of government acronyms, is really that the information you have, you can get to. That somebody hasn't messed with it. So, availability, you can get to it. Integrity, somebody hasn't messed with it. Somebody hasn't gone in and changed something on you. And confidential, that only those who should see it definitely see it. We don't all take our QuickBooks profit and loss statements and paste it on our door for customers to see when we come in. So, how do you make sure that in that profit and loss statement, all that
Mm.
information is, you know, the way that it should be? And then, especially too, you want to trust but verify in what you're doing for security. And this is where it's making sure that hey, we've set up this privacy screen or set up a padlock. How do you make sure that for the keys to the padlock, only the people you trust have it, that an ex-employee doesn't have a key to a padlock? Because padlock is a security item and it's something we're all familiar with. um, so especially today, hey, a lot of people on this call, they're not storing gold bricks. They're simple main street businesses. They're not really high level security banks or anything like that. So, while we're talking about, not, why talking about the physical security, I did want to use it as an analogy again, just to make sure that you can kind of draw those comparisons and go, oh, this thing is like that thing. Um, so in today's day and age, though, your information and your data is your pile of gold. And while you think it might not be that way, it's like, hey, I'm a simple so and so. How could this actually be very valuable? And the truth is, you know, some there's a famous phrase in networking of like your
Mhm.
network is your net worth. So it might be that hey, maybe you don't have a pile of information, but you might have access to someone that would be a very high value target.
Mm.
Maybe you're an accountant, and it turns out that a very important person in the area is one of your clients, and you've been doing taxes for them for forever because you got started with them. And especially too, people are very good at walking into a place and getting a vibe and understanding it very quickly and saying like, oh, this place is not safe, i.e. the dark
Mhm.
alley, middle of the night, haven't seen any people for a while. So how do you do that in the digital world where it's not really set up to have our spidey senses tingling at the same time? So analogies are a little easier to understand than for me to go
Mm.
through a robust defense in depth scenario for
Yeah,
cybersecurity. So we're going to stick
for
with
sure.
analogies for making the comparisons. So while you may not store that gold brick in uranium, your business is a facility. that is storing precious treasures alone in a sea of marauders. So for today, be prepared for a number of nuclear plant and bank comparisons. And for my, if any NRC friends are listening, I'm going to speak about the nuclear plants in a very general term. I'm not going to
Mm,
use any specifics for any plants, and I'm pretty sure that most of them are usually
mm.
TV and movie examples as well.
Yeah.
So, what is security? I hinted at it a little bit earlier, but it's not a philosophical question. It does have an actual definition. And again, it's that CIA triangle that I mentioned before. Um, it's the idea of confidential, integrity, available, and a bank is a great comparison for this, right?
Yeah.
When I go to Rockland Trust, I don't need to have everybody knowing how much I have in my checking account.
Mhm.
I want to make sure the checking account amount is exactly what I think it is, and that I can get to the checking account when I want to. So, making sure that those pieces are all together really comes to that concept of security of being able to
Mm,
move through. So let's take a look at for this facility, either a bank or even your own business. Let's think about the different things that we work with. And here for the battlefield of security, let's think of it in terms of that physical security piece. So, you have the badges. A lot of companies will have you wear a badge around your neck that allows you to get into different buildings or say that you actually work there. You have public facing. So, hey, when the public sees your business, is it um, how is it easy to impersonate you? What kind of is going on with that PR portion of it? There's repairs. If you have a fence, is it all rusted out? Making sure that you're fixing things that are around. Guards, which is a big obvious one. Perimeter, someplace again to that fence analogy, making sure that hey, you want to make sure there's a certain distance between
mhm,
um, the general public and you. Education, putting that culture together of probably if you've ridden a lot of public transportation, to see something, say something, saying that you hear over and over again. Locks, which I hope everyone on this call is familiar with. And then surveillance, making sure that for all these pieces, how you kind of have that eye in the sky and overlooking everything. So let's start with badges. Concept everyone's familiar with. It identifies clearly who someone is. You want to make sure a badge is hard to imitate or copy. It's a policeman's badge is definitely
mhm,
hard to copy. Big metal thing. You want to make sure that it's displayed conspicuously. It says that yes, I am in fact. Obviously, there's other clues that somebody is a police officer,
mm,
right? And then in the business world, it might be a little harder for that. But for if you think of most modern businesses, especially the larger ones that maybe have a larger physical security budget, their badge will allow them to get into the building. They hold it, it goes beep, they walk
mhm,
in, and it allows you to make sure the right people are in the right place. Because some of those access control pieces can say, like, hey, Jimmy can get into anywhere in the building, but Johnny can only get into the main floor. He's not allowed into the
mm,
security office or the cash vault.
mm,
So for a badge, which is obvious, hangs around someone's neck and goes beep when you hold it up to something, what's the IT equivalent? That's your user account. So your username and password are pretty much the badge of the internet. But just like in the real world, they can be stolen. So how do you
mhm,
kind of go above and beyond? Now in the real world, the badge has the physical picture. I look at the badge, I look at the picture, I look at the guy, and it's one of those like, wow, when
mhm,
did you go blonde? Or when
mhm,
did you grow a mustache? Um, so you want to make sure that you go beyond for being able to check those badges. So I know in some places they'll use a fingerprint scanner or a hand scanner in addition to the badge. And that's kind of like the multi-factor authentication. You take out your phone,
mhm,
you punch in the code. It's that little additional step beyond looking at the picture and going,
right.
huh. Because a great example too is my driver's license. When I turned 21 and it renewed, they still used my picture from when I was 16, and so down in North Carolina, trying to go to watering hole establishments as a 22-year-old,
Mhm,
I got a lot of funny faces of you look awfully young in this picture, sir, from Massachusetts. Um, and so it's pretty important. And then the other thing a badge can do is you can leave a trail of like who walked in at what
mm,
time, right? So a lot of places will say like, oh, Johnny badged in at X o'clock, and user account logins can kind of do that same thing.
Mm.
So user accounts are really thinking about badges. You can have a bunch of different badges, bunch of different key cards based on the different places that you go. So let's move to the next phase of the battlefield, the public facing portion. And so public facing, you have some of the PR, but you also have,
Mm.
the mail that's coming in and out. You're sending mail out, like actual physical letters, you're sending mail in, and you want to make sure that in the mail that's coming in and out, you don't have anything suspicious in it. I'm sure everyone on here remembers the season of anthrax threats that were going through the
Mm.
mail, and strange white powder in envelopes, and making sure that that's not coming in and out. Um, and the other thing too is, your facilities, things leave facilities. It's nothing is a self-contained island. And maybe there's information that you take a file out of your office, maybe that profit and loss statement, because you're
Mm.
reviewing it with your significant other to say, see, honey, look how good we're doing. Um, or maybe not. But you don't want that sensitive item in the passenger seat of your car when you're out in a sketchy neighborhood, or maybe you're just going to the coffee shop. You don't want somebody to walk by, look in your car seat, because I mean, we all do. And you
Yeah.
look in and you go, ooh, interesting. So, you have that public persona too. And maybe you want to keep up a certain public image of, hey,
Mm.
we take things seriously, we're squared away. So a good IT comparison of that would be your email and your cloud. Your email is a lot of things coming in and going out of your business, and the same thing for different cloud storage platforms like SharePoint. Pretty much anywhere where you're taking some piece of information like a document and it's going away from your hard drive to something is pretty much a public facing piece. So part of it is you want to make sure that people aren't impersonating you or your staff. Hey, you don't want somebody saying like, "Oh, no, I totally work for Acme Corporation." And there's certain things you do with your email to make sure that somebody can't do that. You want to provide some authenticity in like helping prevent fakes. Like, hey, I know real estate attorneys deal with this all the time. Every single email usually has at the bottom that says wire instructions will come from FedEx. If you do not receive FedEx certified mail, the wiring instructions are fraudulent and to ignore it.
Mm.
And a quick aside, if you're wondering where those come from, it's usually that someone is not in the attorney's email. It's usually that someone's in the person's email. And a
Mm.
rule and an alert has been set up as soon as they start seeing some type of real estate transaction going. And so they sit and they wait. And when the moment arrives, in goes these new wiring instructions. And especially too, some of it as well, a great point with like different document sharing platforms is some people don't realize that they're publicly sharing links, saying that like, hey, I've got
Mm.
this proposal for how to set this thing up. Could you take a look at it and let me know what you think? And they go to share it and they use a publicly facing link that, pretty much anybody could pick up this link and view what's in there.
Mm.
It's tough to stumble upon them, but it is very easy to steal it and move around. So you want to prevent people from peeking through the windows and stealing any type of information. It's kind of there's a way digitally to say for your eyes only.
Yeah.
And then just as a reminder, if you use the internet, you do have a public facing part of your business because something is going out of the building and coming in. So moving on is repairs. So this is another one of, if you think about the feeling that you get if you went to your local bank and you saw that there was a rusted hinge on the door, maybe there's a cracked window, and would you really feel that that bank was safe and secure and that your money is being taken care of? Sure, there's a lot of psychology there about, hey, if they can't do the little stuff well, how well can they do the big stuff? But in reality, some of those things that get rusted or broken over time can all affect security. A rusted hinge is very easy to break off. If there's a broken window, you can reach through and undo the lock from the other side. And while some repairs might not be as obvious as a broken window, if somebody is sitting, watching, and looking, they can be exploited by someone who's watching.
Mm.
They could look and see, like, hey, wait a minute, that one camera doesn't have power. That needs to be fixed. Let me sneak past that. Repairs are definitely not a sexy part of security, but it's a consistent, necessary piece. You want to make sure that all the different components and things that you have are up and working as expected. And while some of that is kind of due to the availability part of, making sure your computers are working, the other part to it is patches. So let's say, like, how really, for most of us, when we're using our computer, we really wouldn't know what, maybe there's a gap in the window right here because of the way that it was sealed, or hey,
Mm.
it turns out this hinge has been rusting a little bit and needs a little bit of repair. So luckily, patches usually are behind the surface most of the time. And then every once in a while, they do fix big glaring issues that we're like, man, this printer has never worked until this patch came out. Um, but patches pretty much are those regular repairs of the little things that are in that whole window or system or building.
Yeah.
So moving to the next piece is guards. Now, this is probably the most obvious security piece. I mean, you walk in a
Mhm.
place, there's a uniformed guard. You know, if you think of like the hardcore one, maybe I'm thinking about it, maybe this is somebody at a sporting event. It's the guy, he's armed to the teeth, quite literally, and he's scanning the crowd. He's looking at everyone. He's very focused. This is the hardcore squared away guy. And you know that if something happened, he would be containing a suspect, or if something was really getting out of hand, he would probably use some form of lethal force. And most of the time, this is a security component that people
Mm.
really feel. They see the big bad dude. Uh, he's you can see the gun, you can see the cuffs, you can kind of see the equipment, and it definitely gives a specific
Yeah.
feeling of, oh man, I better not do anything suspicious, or hey, wow, I'm really glad he's there, and um, glad somebody's keep an eye out for us.
Mm.
And I think the best analogy for guards would be the threat protection platform. Some people call it
Mhm.
antivirus. We've been calling it a protection platform because it does more than just like, is file good, is file bad? Kind of thinking in that analogy, it's more suspicious behavior.
Mhm.
Hey, if there's a guy, he's walking, he's got a sweatshirt on, he's got his hood up, and he's marching straight. Sure, he might be a little sketchy, but he seems to be a man on the mission. It's not any. We'll keep an eye on him, but it's nothing to
Mm.
raise an alarm on. You know, Same guy, hood up, keeps looking over his shoulder, looks like he's carrying something heavy underneath his sweatshirt, keeps looking over his shoulder. All right, that behavior warrants a hey man, what are you doing? Um, and kind of like that, it can sometimes get in the way. It might be
Mm.
that the dude carrying something heavy is he's got a heavy book. Um, he's keeping it under his sweatshirt to keep it dry, and he's marching along trying to get somewhere, and he keeps looking back to make sure that his partner is with him for following him along for the book that he has or whatever.
Mm.
And so sometimes it can get in the way and interrupt the day to day, but it's you just kind of let the guard know, hey,
Yeah.
that's Bobby, he's good to go. But the antivirus and protection platforms do that same quarantine. We call it kill and quarantine. And, that would be the effect of like throw cuffs on the program, bring it to the back room, figure out what's going on with it and make the decision there.
Mm.
But in the IT world, you don't have to go through the justice system for execution. So definitely a little different there, but
Yeah.
that would be killing the quote unquote bad guy when it comes to the antivirus part. So those are we use Sentinel-1, which nice little comparison to the concept of a Sentinel. It even has the big bad helmet, so that helps hit the point home a little
Yeah.
bit. So moving from the guards patrol a lot of things. One of the things they patrol is a perimeter, and so any folks with military background have probably heard about securing a perimeter. And an easy thing to think about here would be hey, you have a wall surrounding the facility, and if we think of some places where it's one of those like you really want to keep people out. Maybe the fence has barbed wire at the top. It usually has some specific place that you can come into the facility. And when you're coming into the facility, you're being sized up as you come in. The airport is a great
Mm.
example of this. You can't just walk out onto the tarmac. Logan is surrounded by water, and where it's not, it has you know fences with barbed wire, and then you come into a specific place. And when you come in, you get an X-ray machine. Or when I was at the nuke plant, they would do bomb sniffers where they puff your clothes and look for chemicals on your clothes. Um, so it's one of those very rigid mechanical piece of coming through the perimeter. It's not always getting patted down by a guard.
Mm.
Sometimes there's those machines we all pass through, and
Yeah.
then there are still those guard pieces looking at the information that comes through. Is if anybody's had a bag pulled at TSA, people are still looking at what's in the
Yeah.
bag. So for your perimeter, that's your firewall. I mean, the good news is it's not as easy as kind of walking onto the reservation when it comes to the digital world. Places have to come in through the internet, which you might think it's pretty easy for.
Mm.
Hey, the router is just one thing, but the internet has these things. Most networks have these things called ports, and different
Mhm.
ports usually handle different specific functions. And the analogy I've used for ports is um, the port might be a window, might be a door, might be a chimney,
Mm.
might be a sewage pipe. Each of these ports, while they leave the facility, they all do a specific thing. And in the digital world, the different type of traffic, either
Mhm.
light, air, waste, whatever, all moves through that. You all want it moved in that specific place. So
Yeah.
for a firewall, the intrusion prevention and gateway antivirus are those X-rays and bomb sniffers at the network edge. They're
Mhm.
looking at the things coming in. What's in the package? Is there anything suspicious? If it's suspicious, tell it to go away. There's also blocking different ways in, saying like, hey, if you're trying to get in through this window, like nobody's crawling through windows here. Hey,
Mm.
you got to come in through the door, go through the process. And you can also record what comes in at specific entrances. So let's say you've opened a port for the printer to be able to talk to a managed printer service for saying, hey, you need to order new toner or you need a new part or something. You want to make sure you have something that's recording that, yep, the printer thing came in at this time from this place and it's what we expected. The answer
Mm.
there is usually great. Um, and kind of coming to that too is that education portion. And honestly, this is really probably the biggest one, is
Mhm.
because all the different defenses and things that are there, if you think about it, um, the culture has a portion of, if you have windows and everything's locked and the culture is pretty lackadaisical, like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Or, there's rusty hinges and
Yeah.
things that need to be fixed. And you're like, I'll get around to it. I don't, kind of take some
Yeah, yeah.
lack
If
of.
they're like leaving a stick in the doorway to keep it open so they don't have to like badge in every time or go around the front, that
Exactly.
kind
And
of thing.
it's the company culture really makes the whole thing work. And vigilance is tough. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try and claim that people should be major automatons being able to do the right thing every time. Vigilance for security, you really need accountability from your peers. That, because we all have this, where it's very easy to point out what somebody else is doing and going, hey, whoa, that wasn't kosher, that's not good. It's very easy to do that. um, and obviously it's tough to do that to ourselves. So accountability from peers is huge, and making sure the culture is there to allow people to see something, say something like, hey, I noticed that there's a weird workaround for leaving that door propped open. Maybe that's not a great idea.
Mm.
And for cybersecurity, I mean, education is education. There's really nothing. um, it's really about educating what the suspicious behavior looks like. Because if we know that, hey, the door should be locked at all times and we should only be letting in people that we
Mm.
know, and it's one of those like, I'll just leave the door unlocked for me to be able to, so I'm coming and going, it's fine. You want to have the same analogies of, hey, you have a phishing test for see something, say something,
Yeah.
like, hey, I got this weird email about a shared document from someone, be on the lookout, this looks fishy. And you also want to consistently bring it up, when you're having company meetings about policies. um, Sometimes you got to state what the policies of how your company should be
Mm.
operating, and it definitely is important to bring up that security portion, cybersecurity portion of it as well, to say, hey, we're here to, you know, I shouldn't have to say it, but you do have to say, like, please don't talk about the private
Mhm.
lives of our clients to, whoever you meet on the street. And the same thing goes for making sure the digital information about that conversation is protected. Um, And then also too, it's taking it seriously from an HR perspective.
Mm,
So, if you have a client, if you have an employee who's clicking on links and suspicious emails and, hey, the guards are catching it every once in a while, but, if one just slips in and sets off the proverbial ransomware bomb, I
mm,
mean, it just takes the one to set the bomb off and make things go sideways. And, that's a huge risk to the company. And you might think, oh, it's okay, it's one innocent mistake. But if you have education and you're doing consistent testing for making sure that, are people clicking on these type of things, this would be pretty similar to an employee who maybe is getting reported consistently for maybe sexist behavior, maybe discriminatory behavior.
mm,
If you have an employee who's behaving a certain way that directly puts the company at risk, the cyber risk is just as big as that HR risk of saying, hey, um, hey, Nathan, like you really can't talk to the female members of the office that way. You really
mm,
have to clean your language up. And maybe if we change that behavior of, being worried about the female employees having some type of lawsuit, hey, Nathan, you can't keep clicking everything that comes in for a free
yeah,
Amazon gift card because one of these times it's going to be the bad one and it's
yeah,
all going to, now you're going to have the lawsuit. Now you're going to have a bunch of time taken away from actually doing the work to clean up a mess because an employee was being risky. Um, so education is probably the biggest one because making sure you have that culture, everyone's looking out, it helps enforce all the other pieces. This is an easy one for locks for physical. I mean, we all know
yeah,
what a lock is. I'm assuming everyone on the call has a car
yeah.
locks. And there are a variety of lock performance, right? You know, some of them simple padlocks. I'm if anybody's been down a YouTube rabbit hole and seen the lock picking lawyer, he
Mhm,
loves taking master locks and just popping them open really quick. And most of the time, a lock is really for keeping an honest person honest.
mm,
Hey, challenge the door, it's locked. I give up. Um, and then sometimes there are locks that prevent people from getting in, full stop. And,
mm,
that could be big bank vault, crazy deadbolt, reinforced steel door of, hey, this thing in here is so important. You are going to have to blow it up in order to get
mm,
through here if you don't have the key, or cut it with a torch weld, or do something absolutely crazy. And even then, it's still not, foolproof. Watch any heist movie.
mm,
Safes are a lock, and eventually the protagonist gets through the safe to get to whatever they're looking for, or antagonist, depending upon
yeah,
the movie. And then the other thing too, just as a quick thing for locks, is I don't know about you guys, but sometimes every once in a while you'll have something where the lock, you lock the door and you let it close, and it turns out it didn't latch all the way, and if you just pull on it,
mm,
it opens. So even in physical locks, just general life advice: give them a tug, give them a
yeah,
quick challenge, make sure it's actually locked. Um, and that kind of goes into locks in the IT world are encryption, and how it's very easy for making sure a door is locked, right? You grab the doorknob and you go shake
mhm,
shake, and hey, does it open in my hand, or does it stay locked? Um, and for making sure that the lock is locked in our world is, hey, is the encryption turned on and I have a key? You have to kind of
mm,
generate the lock a little bit. Um, and encryption too, variety of performance. Some of it is, hey, absolutely no one is getting in. Some of it
mhm,
is keep honest people honest. And usually the key to a lock is kind of similar to those badges I talked about earlier. Could be a password, a badge, multi-factor. That's how you kind of unlock that lock. So we've talked about, for the battlefield, a lot of different pieces of what we're used to in physical security, and that kind of brings us to the last piece for surveillance, which I think a lot of people, when they think security, really start to hone in on, which is the surveillance portion.
mm,
Hey, you got some offices and places have security cameras recording what's going on. Who's where, when, what are they doing? And there you go. You have a film from a certain angle of person walks in, you see him do the thing, you see him walk away, and you go, there it is. Although security cameras have a variety of performance, right? Some
yeah,
security cameras are was this filmed on a Sony camcorder from 1998, and why can't I see anybody's face? Versus, wow, that is crystal clear HD video at 300 yards. So kind of the same deal for security camera performance. Um, and a lot of times if somebody's looking at the cameras, you can catch someone in the act. You see the dude throw his fist and break the window, got him in the
Mm.
act. Or maybe you have to go back in time and say, hey, like, what happened? And surveillance in this case is a SIEM, or security incident and event manager.
Mhm.
And so every device on your network kind of keeps their own record of what happens. So there's really no, like, you're not videoing physical things that move through a
Yeah.
facility, but each machine has a log of any different actions or anything that happens. And the SIEM collects those logs and it runs through them and it looks for different entries that say, hey, there was 15 login attempts, because the machines typically aren't set up to
Mm.
automatically alert for these type of things.
Yeah.
The SIEM takes all that data that's being dumped, i.e. the footage, and kind of parses through and say, hey, wait a minute. And the other thing it can do as well is, um, maybe you have something happens on one machine and you have the record of something happens there, and then you can tell the attacker went somewhere else.
Mm.
Similar to, like, hey, the person was on camera A and then they walked out a shot and now I don't know where they are. The nice thing a SIEM does too is kind of shows, you can see how somebody moves through the facility of, like, okay, they started in the foyer, they made it to the first hallway, then they made it to this room, and then they did this. So the
Mm.
SIEM kind of helps put that picture together of how people move through your digital world. And so the SIEM is a security camera of that world, and SIEMs usually come similar to security camera systems. Some camera systems have X amount of footage, like, hey, you get to view this many hours, right? And you view it
Mm.
on your phone. After X amount of time, it's deleted. SIEMs have the same deal. Hey, we're going to store this much worth of time of records, and then after that, it gets cleared out. So it's SIEMs are definitely the security cameras of the IT world. And
Mhm.
secretly, we are automatically deploying 7-day retention SIEMs for all clients, just because we're
Mhm.
seeing that it's become a necessity for making sure things are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that was a lot. 8 phases in the battlefield,
Yeah.
a lot going on, a lot of different pieces for security, and it can be really tough to keep track of it all. Um, And then on top of that, too, obviously for the clients who are working with us, there are different ways that we prove it to you that we are being held responsible to what we're doing. Um, and one way, too, for making sure that the fox doesn't run the hen house is for us. We've partnered with a company called Galactic Scan for doing third party assessments for keeping objectivity. They're
Mhm.
not system support employees, they
Yeah.
have specific standards. And effectively, the service we get from them is, we are buying from them the ability to get assessed. So
Yeah.
that way, it's making sure that um, we are above board. We've gone through a lot of internal improvements for increasing security, and that third party assessment is a great way of checking your own work. You can be great at your job, but it always is worth it to have that objective second pair of eyes to see what's going on.
Yeah. I think for security especially, oftentimes it's only gonna be as smart as you are. You know, you're gonna be able to plug all the holes that you think of, so it's great to have a third party come and look at that. And I think if people want to learn a little bit more about Galactic Scan, we had our previous webinar, and that video on demand is available.
Yeah, that Galactic Scan webinar for going through the sample report is fantastic, because it goes to show. I mean, they dress up a pretty scary. Hey, this is a company that
Mm.
doesn't have anybody in charge, and how's they trying to hit as many boxes to really show the
Yeah.
full breadth of what they find. But I actually had a chance to meet Bruce, the CEO of Galactic Scan, last week, and I got a chance to ask him, hey, from when you're working with a lot of companies, how often do they pass that scan on the first go? He goes 0.02%. And the thousands of companies that they've assessed, they've really only had He said he can count them on his fingers and toes for the thousands. And he's in the thousands of companies scanned. How many have passed on the first go? So they always find something, and it's just sometimes it's, hey, we know that's a risk and we've accepted it, and sometimes it's, you know, hey, holy crap, we didn't know we were that exposed. So in that, one thing we're offering for a lot of current clients and any prospective clients is we would love to do that same galactic scan assessment for you. It's very easy to do. Um, we set up, ask a few questions just to finish up the questionnaire. We send an email with a link. Click the link, a little program runs, and that program is a simulation of clicking on a bad link in an email. So the idea is, simulating that phishing attack, and how bad could it really be. And um, while it's not that employees do anything wrong by clicking that link, it's more about, hey, we're simulating that maybe the thing you got sent is from a vendor that you trust and you were expecting it, and it was just that right time, right message deal for getting through. So for clients who want to go ahead and get signed up for that assessment, if you go to our website, systemsupport.com/cyber, there is a link there to get set up for a time for getting connected to answer those questions and to send that email. So with that, that's everything I have for this afternoon. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think that seemed pretty comprehensive. I think the analogy between physical security and cybersecurity is important because it's very easy to visualize like what a secure environment looks like because we've seen it in movies, in TV, sort of that vibe, and it's harder to say like, oh, what does that look like online? What does that look like, from a computer perspective? Because as far as I'm concerned, like the computer is the computer, and it just beeps at me when I'm in trouble. So having a deeper understanding is always helpful.
Yeah, and especially too, the other thing with security is, as I think of some of the physical analogies is, you know, in some cases you don't need to be really crazy Fort Knox level security, right? Not every place has to protect the gold bricks at that same level. And because I mean, I don't think any of us would really want to see what the budget for Fort Knox is for how expensive it is to maintain. Um, do you really need to have infrared cameras in every square inch of the building, and et cetera, et cetera? It's like, all right, just do the reasonable assurance of adequate protection. But the one thing too, at least for, hey, kind of going to the point of the armed guards for the threat protection, you really do need those because there is no police officer in the
Mm.
IT world, right? If something bad is happening, you do need something that can come in, for all the things that are just installed in place, something that can be a little more active to be able to help fix things up. And I think the antivirus and the threat protection platforms being those first responders are are huge. And then um, being able to kind of hang on to it and then having that second pair of eyes, human eyes, like take a look at
Mhm.
it and see what's going on with it. But you definitely need something that quickly stops whatever's going on in progress and goes from there.
Absolutely. And I had a thought, and then I lost the train of thought. As far as cyber police, like even once you get to that point, like the horse is already out of the barn, and then you're looking at like, oh well, what is my insurance going to pay for? And if you don't have some of these components in, I'm sure insurance isn't going to be super happy to be like, well, you didn't have antivirus software, like you guys turned off all these other things to make it easy for you. I assume that's gonna make them hesitant to pay out. I'm not an insurance expert or a lawyer. Don't take my advice,
Well, and
but
it's especially too to that, if you think of it, if your home and your home gets robbed and it's like, well, yeah, I left my front door open, I left my front door unlocked and didn't tell anyone I was gone for 2 weeks, and somebody came in and stole all my stuff. It's one of those, like, hey, what's going on? And then, especially for the insurance portion, it's, um, if you told the insurance company that you had a certain thing in place and then it turns out you didn't, and you lied on your application, that's not going to go over well. It's not going to go over well at all.
No.
And especially too, it's one of those, it kind of goes to that trust but verify point, and that making sure that the lock is actually locked.
Mhm.
You don't want to find out that, oh yeah, yeah, I checked the box that multi-factor was enabled, and then it turns
Mhm.
out it's not. Um, that's not a good look. It's not a good look at all. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
and
I mean,
again, if anyone wants to learn more, just hit that link below, systemsupport.com/cyber. And thank you all so much for coming. Any last thoughts, Will?
I'd say everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks for spending some time with me this afternoon, and look forward to meeting you guys.
All right. Well, you have a great afternoon. Good night, everybody.
You too. Bye.